This week we're talking about a herb that has so many fond childhood memories for me. But as well as keeping my friends and I entertained for hours on end, it's a potent herbal ally when you're dealing with upper respiratory tract infections. Soothing, balancing and rebuilding. This week we're talking about Plantago lanceolata or Ribwort Plantain. Let's get started, shall we?
Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Project Joyful podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Tutty, your medical herbalist and high performance coach. So, hey, Project Joyful isn't just about being happy. It's about consciously creating a life you love. It's about remembering how to reconnect with your soul-centered joy. You know, that joy that comes from doing what you love, from living on purpose, and from being in a life that allows you to experience deep joy moment by moment. So hey, let's get started, shall we?
What better way to follow on from our 150th episode that aired last week than with a Herbal Ally Series? This week we're talking about Ribwort Plantain, also known as Narrow Leaf Plantain or Plantago lanceolata. When I think of Ribwort Plantain, I'm reminded of my late father-in-law. I think all farmers will relate to this. He'd look at my lawn packed with narrow and broadleaf plantain and dandelions and he'd shake his head. He didn't mind the clover, as like all legumes, that fixed nitrogen into the ground, improving your soil quality. For farmers, the plantains and dandelions are weeds. For herbalists, they're medicine. Ribwort plantain is also a plant from my childhood when we used to launch the seed heads like mini missiles by looping the stalk around the flower head and flicking it off its stalk. I'm told they also make a riveting conkers replacement if you're stuck for something to do on a sunny summer's afternoon. The plantain seed is a laxative. One species of plantain, Plantago ovata, is better known as psyllium husk. From a digestive health perspective, it's used as a relatively gentle, bulk-forming laxative. So when taken with water, it forms a bulky gel by bringing in water from your colon. And this is why it's really important to consume with a couple of glasses of water. It's also a prebiotic, so it's gorgeous food for your probiotics. And it can help to control blood sugar if you're diabetic. In cooking, it's used as a thickener and binding agent, and it's also a gluten-free baker's best friend, as the psyllium husk gel can increase in volume by up to 20 times, making your water gluten-free batter into a kneadable dough. It's rather timely that we're talking about Ribwort plantain because it is the herb for bringing balance to respiratory tissues. It's known herbally as a mucous membrane trophorestorative, which means it has a fondness for the respiratory system and a tendency to balance out either overactive or underactive issues. But what do we mean by mucous membrane? Well, it's the tissue that's found in your sinus and nasal passages, in your throat, in your lungs, your digestive tract and your urinary tract. So all places that this herb has an affinity for. It's also a great skin herb, particularly for overcoming itchiness. It's a key ingredient in my pollen barrier ointment, where the soothing qualities of Ribwort plantain, combined with its anti-itch and anti-allergic action, means it brings more than the sum of its parts to the fight against hay fever, otherwise known as allergic rhinitis. And if you're keen to grab the recipe, check out my Instagram and LinkedIn feeds, as I'll post about it there. It's much more fun when you can see pictures of the plants, I think. Its traditional use as an anti-allergic remedy is supported by a multitude of research. Ribwort plantain is one for the field-based medicine kit, so make sure you know what it looks like all year round. It's useful when you're in the field and you find yourself with windburn, sunburn, an insect bite, or you face an impromptu battle with stinging nettle. Ribwort plantain's soothing anti-inflammatory, anti-itch properties come to the rescue here. For herbal first aid, apply it to the affected area as a spit poultice. For obvious reasons, you probably want to make your own spit poultice, but here's how you do it. All you want to do is chew a couple of young leaves and your saliva will mix with the mucilaginous properties of the leaf and it will form into a gel. Apply this gel to the wound. Now, if you've got a brew on the campfire, you can steam a couple of leaves, again the young leaves, leave them to cool to an easily handled temperature and mash them together to form a poultice. Research reports an antibacterial action against gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria. It's also able to open up the bronchioles which are found in your lungs. And this action, combined with the soothing mucilaginous properties of Ribwort Plantain, make it a particularly helpful herb when there's a dry, irritating cough. Now, you can also consider using it when there's a productive cough as well, because it's a trophorestorative. So because you have lots of phlegm, it's also going to be using those drying tannins, and they can dry that excess mucus. But also they'll soothe that digestive lining or that respiratory tract lining, thanks to those demulcent properties that come from all that mucilage. It's good to use the younger leaves as they tend to have more iridoid alkaloids such as acubin and catalpol. And these are thought to be responsible for the antibacterial activity. It's great as an ingredient in your cold and flu tea as it encourages coughing, but it soothes at the same time. The anti-inflammatory action of plantain has been observed in studies as being similar to a low dose of aspirin. And this is because the observed mechanism of action was reported as an ability to reduce the inflammatory prostaglandin E2, or PGE2, and the thromboxane A2, otherwise known as TXA2, production. Interestingly, TXA2 is known to constrict bronchial smooth muscle, intestinal smooth muscle, uterus and urinary bladder muscles as well. So these findings confirm its traditional use as a bronchial dilator and anti-inflammatory. Enough about the science though. How do I like to take my Ribwort Plantain? Well, I love it in a tea, especially if I feel something chesty coming on. Consider combining it with calendula to get that lymph moving as well. It's always on hand as a spit poultice for those inevitable bites, scratches and itches that come from being in the garden, and I like to infuse it in an oil using the slow cooker. Now you can also infuse it in oil using a bain-marie method, but you need to keep an eye on it because oil on a stove is always something to be on the watch for. Even if there's a water bath between the oil and the source of heat, keep an eye on it. As an infused oil, plantain's added to my pollen barrier ointment and soothing skin salves. I also like to use plantain as a syrup for coughs and colds, and I top the syrup up with whichever herbs best serve in the moment, such as the antiviral elderberry or thyme, decongesting elderflower or immune boosting echinacea. To make a syrup, you make a super strong Ribwort Plantain tea, and then you add double the amount of sugar and reduce that mixture on the stovetop. You can add in some lemon to bring the sweetness down as well, and it's lovely combined with violet as a syrup. Ribwort Plantain is one of my favourite herbs for so many reasons. It's effective when there are upper respiratory complaints or digestive tract is feeling a little bit irritated, and it reminds me of summers as a child, flinging bits of plant at friends because, well, that's what we did for kicks back then. Now remember, plant medicine is potent medicine. If you have any underlying health conditions, you're pregnant, you're trying to get pregnant, or you're lactating, or if you're taking any medications, don't just rely on the information in this episode. Just because it's natural, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you. Please do get individual advice by consulting with your medical herbalist. Not only are they trained in which herbs affect a particular health condition or your current life season, they're also trained in herb drug and herb supplement interactions. And they know how to choose exactly the right herb for you. You see, your body knows exactly what it needs to heal itself, be that herbal, pharmaceutical, food-based, emotion or mind medicine. My job as your herbalist is to connect you with the herbs your body is already searching for. Sending you lots of love. Bye for now.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. Can I ask you a favour? If our conversation spoke to you today, could you please take a moment to leave a 5-star review? Your review will help people discover this podcast, and together we can create a world where there's even more love and more laughter. And if you want to hear more from the Project Joyful podcast, just click the subscribe button. Bye for now.